Welcome to Mining the Media, providing nuggets of news and cutting-edge questions and answers, minus the political blather. Here are your hosts, G.K. Allen and Dave Jeffers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Mining the Media. I'm Dave Jeffers, producer and co-host. That's G.K. Allen, our creator and co-host. And we are so very honored to bring Professor Frank Furedi, who's a sociologist and does a lot of social commentating. When you go to his website, frankfuredi.com, that's F-U-R-E-D-I, you'll see the content that's there. He's a professor, emeritus professor of sociology at the University of Kent in Canterbury. And Professor Furedi, I'll make the biggest understatement of our podcast history here is we are unbelievably honored to have you on our show, sir.
A pleasure to be here and talking with you.
Yes, sir.
One of my favorite things in reading about you and listening to your lectures online, and to anyone of any age, whether you're left of center, right of center, dead center, or off center, folks, go to his site. The lectures are brilliant. You talk a lot about democracy, and one of the lectures I listened to, he kind of wrapped it up by saying democracy is a way of life. And I find that statement to be genuinely meaningful, because sometimes we put it into the little box of the voting box or ballot, when it's really, in a sense, a lifestyle, a mindset, and a way to live.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things that I've learned in my life is that there is no guarantee for freedom other than a democratically minded citizen. And one of the things I've become very sort of suspicious of is when governments tell you, we'll look after you, we care about your interests, we're going to guarantee that all kinds of positive things will occur. And the evidence shows that at the end of the day, the only thing that ensures that freedom is preserved and that democracy flourishes is when people demand to be heard. And when people become passive and basically say, well, the experts or the politicians can take over, that's really the point at which democracy is in trouble, because it means that precisely the lifeblood of democracy ceases to have very much of a role in public life. So that's why I wrote been writing quite a bit about the importance of getting ordinary people to understand that they are really the ultimate guarantors of our freedom and of our democracy.
And that's Democracy Under Siege.
That's right. Yeah, I wrote that little book because I became really perturbed by the fact that so many people look down upon democracy. So many people argue that ordinary people should not be taken seriously, that their beliefs and their ideals shouldn't really count, and certainly should not have the same weight as that of a very educated person or somebody with PhDs and all kinds of degrees. And I felt that kind of contempt for the people is one of the illnesses that afflicts many of our Western societies.
Dave?
You know, the way I got introduced to you, Professor, was your article that you wrote titled Why Tucker's Trip to Hungary Has Sparked Outrage. And one of the things you write in there is about how the Western media had such an over-the-top reaction to Carlson's visit. And you said it was telling because they're clearly concerned that the propaganda war they have successfully fought to discredit the Hungarian government might be set back if ordinary Americans actually get to hear what Orban has to say. And that goes back to what you're saying is, you know, we're not supposed to think for ourselves. We're supposed to totally trust the elites, the leaders, the experts, and all that. And you're saying that's an actual threat to them when we decide, no, we can make up our own minds.
Well, that's right. And I think that one of the things that the Western media hates about Orban and Hungary is that in Hungary, there's a very strong sense of popular sovereignty. I think that when you walk around the streets of Budapest, you find that people are much more engaged in public life than they do, for example, in Britain, where I live, or in the United States. And they have decided for themselves, at least the majority has decided for themselves, that their view of the world is not necessarily the same as that which the media tells them. And therefore, to that extent, I can understand why the NBC, the ABC, the CNN, really hates Hungary and regards the government as some kind of cultural criminals, because their view of the world is very different and their view of the people is very different. For example, people in Hungary are proud to call themselves populists. Mm-hmm. Whereas in America, when I give a lecture in New York or in Chicago, very often when I talk about the importance of populism as a political outlook, I get accused of being a fascist or far right or something like that. And people don't understand that populism is a very respectable part of our democratic way of life. Since the 18th, 19th century, it was the populists in the United States and elsewhere who made a very important contribution to what is our political outlook, what is the modern democratic political outlook. It wasn't a gift from above that made democracy possible. It was people demanding the right to be heard.
You mentioned something in your lecture. Speaking of that, I think one of the most controversial presidents, regardless of the political position of the historian, would be Andrew Jackson. I think almost any liberal or conservative historian would say he was controversial. You point out that he was very big in promoting voting rights and improving things for the common guy, at least to some extent within his historic time frame.
Yes, I think it's very interesting that if you look back at the 19th century, Andrews and a number of other politicians who had populist affiliations played a very important role. And people forget, for example, that even when it comes to race relations, many of the populists living down in the South were far more robust in advocating equality than either the Republicans or what would be later on the Democrats were. And not only that, but I think the populists, to some extent, provided an alternative voice to the establishment all the way to the present time. So it's interesting. I'm just looking at the United States because one of the things I find really fascinating is that the only people that are objecting to the imposition of a new regime of woke politics in schools are the parents. And in many, many parts of the United States, the parents are calling out the teachers, they're calling out the school boards, they're demanding that, they want their kids to be sort of educated according to the values that they believe in. And I think that's a really positive, sort of democratic way of indicating that, yes, we want our kids educated, but you don't have the right to tell what values our kids should have. That's really our job as parents. And that's been a theme in American politics for a very, very long time. And I'm writing an article at the moment arguing that I wish in Britain and in other parts of Europe, the parents would get off their seats a little bit more and follow the example of these people in America.
Well, the nuclear family is one of the things that got us out of the primordial ooze.
Yeah, and I think it's, I'm a sociologist and I'm aware of the fact that in the last 40 or 50 years, it's almost impossible to find a book written by a sociologist or a social scientist that's actually unambiguously positive about the family. Most of them are critical, they question it, they talk about the dark side of the family. And you almost get the impression that in their eyes, the family is somehow a hothouse of authoritarianism, a hothouse of negative, destructive ideas, not realizing that you and I need the family to have the kind of space to flourish as independent human beings. We rely on our brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers, our wider family members to give us that kind of support. I think one of the things that we learned in the COVID pandemic, to shove, who's going to watch your back, who's going to help you out. At the end of the day, almost invariably, it's either a family member or neighbor rather than some bureaucrat living, sort of miles away from your house.
Or an organization of local citizens.
Right.
Yes.
We call our church a family of families. And we saw what you were saying, Professor, during COVID, because we had a lot of people end up getting it. Some unfortunately died. A couple elderly people died from it. And just to see the wonderful way everybody rallied around each other, lifted each other up, carried each other through the time, that's where it really did manifest the importance of in a democracy. Because I like what you put, and Greg and J.K. brought it up, was liberals and progressives and Marxists look at democracy as a process to gain political power. It's not a philosophy. It used to be a philosophy. And that's why I think they purposely call the United States, which is a republic, has a Republican form of government. They call it a democracy, and all they're talking about is the democratic process to get put into office.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's not just them. I think across the board, most politicians regard democracy pragmatically, opportunistically, as a means to an end, rather than understand that actually it's something that you live on every single day. And I often get accused of being very naive when I argue in different universities or in different parts of Europe. I make the point that at the end of the day, sort of I can live with the fact that the guy I wanted to vote for didn't get elected. Somebody who I oppose got elected rather than somebody that I believe in and support. Because what's important for me is that we go through that whole experience of having that, fighting with each other, clarifying our ideas. And I think that we have to learn that living democratically changes both who we are, but also creates opportunities for almost like constructing a far better, more robust public life.
And I think it's important, and pardon the sports analogy, but if you're learning how to play tennis, you want to play against someone who's a good tennis player. And I think with politics, it's at its best when both sides have people of substance playing tennis, if you will, against each other. You don't become a better tennis player or debater by playing the weak or going against the weak.
No, you're right. And I think this is one of the tragedies in many parts of the world. I think it's a big tragedy in Britain that the opposition to our government is very feeble and very disoriented and confused. Even in Hungary, where I think, on balance, we have a pretty good government as far as democracy and popular sovereignty is concerned, I really worry about the fact that the opposition to the government is again very narrow-minded, pragmatic, not serious. They're not formidable statesmen-like individuals. And I'm sure that what you're really saying is this: that at the end of the day, you and I are as good as the people that challenge us. The more we get challenged and the more we get stretched, the stronger we become, and the more we're able to clarify our ideas. And I, over the years, have learned so much from people I debated with, because you go away, and when you go away, you realize that I could have said something better. I slipped up a little bit. Why didn't I think of this? And as a result, you develop your ideas, and you're much more able to get back into the battle.
You both are bringing up a reminiscence of mine. A good friend of mine, Ambassador Alan Keyes, once debated Alan Dershowitz. Both brilliant men, both very respectful, and I think they were debating religion of all things, which is a hot topic. And I mean, most people won't even touch it, but they had such a great back and forth that what you're saying is, yeah, even the listeners were just spellbound. I was spellbound by watching it and listening to it. And before that, I didn't have a very high opinion of Alan Dershowitz, but I've come to see that he is a true intellectual, democratic thinker.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a very important issue, which is particularly a problem in America, but it's there everywhere else, which is we live in very segmented bubbles where people talk only to people like themselves. Yeah. And therefore their views are reinforced. They become extremely complacent in their ideas. Very often they are either scared or unwilling to discuss openly with people whose views they do not share. And therefore that positive dynamic that comes from political confrontation, from a real political fight, is something that we're not able to exploit and use to our own advantage. And this is a tragedy for young people, because young people become intellectually and morally independent when they have to fight for themselves. They have to argue and learn to hold their corner and be able to come back at criticism rather than just simply be reinforced all the time. And when you have a school system, as you do in the United States, that's always about positive reinforcement, always about raising kids' self-esteem, never criticizing them, you do end up with people who are very flabby politically and intellectually, and really are not prepared to get stuck into a proper public debate or political fight.
I think a lot of times when it comes to media, Dave and I have talked about this many times over the years. People, when they go to Fox or when they go to CNN, people are not looking for information, they're looking for affirmation. If you're a liberal and you want to hear it right from your point of view, you go to CNN. If you're a conservative, though some would argue this now, you would go to Fox. And I think it's very, very important that a conservative read the New York Times and a New York Times reader reads one of the conservative publications. We don't get better by patting each other on the back and saying, we're right, we're right, we're right, because basically you're not even hearing.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I read the New York Times, I read the Guardian, I read Vox, because I've learned something, which is that to be effective, you got to know your argument, the arguments of your opponents, even better than they do. You got to be able to know where they're coming from. You got to understand what makes them tick if you're going to be able to provide a good counterpoint. But also, at the end of the day, sometimes I learn from people I argue with. And I've got friends, for example, who are on the left. I got friends who are on the right. I'm very lucky in that respect, because it's very rare to have that kind of relationship these days. It's very, very rare. But to be honest, the political labels that we're using are becoming less and less relevant now, because you use the word conservative. A lot of people who call themselves conservative, I don't recognize any kind of conservatism in their behavior. A lot of people that call themselves socialist, I don't really recognize their socialism. In general, we have to invent a new language. And what I've started doing is basically telling people when I'm asked, well, what are you, Frank? How would you describe yourself? I always say, well, when it comes to family matters, when it comes to personal relationship, when it comes to our traditions, our legacies, I'm very conservative. I think it's really quite important to be able to conserve the legacy of the past. When it comes to freedom, free speech, the right to choose different options, I'm very liberal in many ways, because I believe in I'm a free speech absolutist. So that when it comes to things like providing a safety network for people, so that if they're poor, there's something that kind of provides for them a little bit, a modicum of care in terms of their health and their education. I've got a very kind of, I presume, in favor of some kind of welfare provision, not the kind of welfare provision that relies on bureaucracies, but some kind of welfare provisions that communities provide. And I know that I'm struggling to define myself, and I've been doing this for a very long time. So you can imagine if you're 20, when I talk to 20-year-old kids, they always say, who am I? How am I going to describe myself? And I remember one morning, sort of over breakfast table, my 18-year-old son tells me, you're lucky. You know who you are. You've been around. You know what is left and what is right. I've got no idea of how can I find a way of expressing my idealism, my desire to do good. Where do I go? What party? And I couldn't give him an answer. I could have given an answer 50 years ago, but today it's a much more difficult problem.
Frank, if you don't mind my changing direction, thank you for your time. And folks, Democracy Under Siege, check it out. I'm going to change directions because of your past, your biography. The first geopolitical thing I was aware of as a child, and I was born in late 1948, was the Hungarian Revolution. And there was a talk show host who was very inspirational to me out of New York City named Barry Farber, who covered the event. As a Hungarian, in 10,000 words or less, what could you tell us about Hungarian Revolution from your point of view and your family's point of view?
Well, I think it changed us completely, because it was a massive event. The fact that a small number of people, a small nation, could defeat the Soviet Stalinist armies initially. And we all believed that we were going to get our freedom. That was a massive event. But what it really meant for us, certainly for me, was an enduring belief in the capacity of people to fight for their freedom. And although I was only 9 at the time, and although we had to flee because both my sister and my dad were involved in the revolution, it has really kept me going all these years. And my belief in the capacity of people to make things happen has never wavered because of that. I think the Hungarian Revolution did show something very positive, that at the end of the day, even a strong totalitarian system like the old style in the Soviet Union cannot just survive indefinitely. People will rebel at the end of the day.
You know that I'm glad you asked that, GK, because earlier, Professor, you said that you're accused, particularly in our country, of being naive. Shame on them. Shame on them for saying that to you, and especially, particularly with what you just answered us, because as a 9-year-old, I mean, my grandson, he's 12, so I remember him at 9. Those are formative years. And for you to remember that, and for your family to have to flee, there's no activity there. There's actual experience and growth. And I'm so glad that you shared that with us, because we're looking at the clock right now. I want to make sure we're respectful of your time, but I think that's possibly the best way we can end this interview, because we take so much for granted. It's been 56 years, right? 65 years since the 1956, and that's a lifetime. I'm 64. I was born the year after that happened. I don't remember it other than reading history books. But for you two gentlemen who are about a decade before me to remember that is special, and I think that's what's missing. GK talked about news. It's become infotainment, and we need to stop that. We need to read other things. We need to listen to other people, and I'm as guilty as anybody. But I'm so thankful that you were able to spend time with us and share that last piece, because there's a lesson for all of us in that it's our life experiences that shape our philosophy. And if you don't have one, you need to find one so you can identify who you are and all that.
Well, Frank, it was really a joy to meet you via this medium. And I really strongly recommend folks check you out if they don't know you already, or recheck you out, if you will, if they already do, because it's refreshing to see so much objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said prior to taping, I appreciate, because I come long before I was in radio, I was in print media. And I really respect people, whether they're writers or spokespeople, who can say it in a few words, don't need 8 syllables to say something. Because I really do believe that people who use the big words are often just obfuscating the fact that they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
And we'll be sure to share your website, sir, here on the show as soon as we get you off camera, so they can. I like to show the website and scroll and show everybody what an amazing resource. I mean, all of his videos, most of his videos, all of his literature's there, links to his columns, his bio. You need to visit this man. I'm so thankful that I discovered you, I think, 10 days ago, whenever I first contacted you. And I thought, hey, let's see if he'll come on our show. I know he's a very busy man. And you were so gracious to answer us immediately. And we're so honored. Thank you so much. And good luck on your I'll look forward to your new article when it comes out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really nice talking to you guys. So,
right,
and good luck with your project.
Thank you so much. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And we're back. Let me show real quick, y'all, this website. Yes, this is his website, Frank Furedi, Furedi, Furedi.com. This is the book that he was talking about, Democracy Under Siege. Here's his lecture that he does with this great illustrator. It's frankfuredi.com, and you can go to his website and watch videos, read articles, buy some of his books. They're fantastic. And
at another time, I hope we can get him on when there's even more news. And today, in the past week or so, news really has been history. It hasn't just been headlines. And I would like to get him on again to talk about what do the Europeans think now about Donald Trump, who many of them portrayed as a buffoon, but who was covering their butts.
Yeah.
Right now, the Europeans are going to get an immigrant wave, terrorism wave, and we might get it in this country too. And what our current president has done is beyond evil. It's worse than anything Lyndon Johnson ever did, James Buchanan ever did, Jimmy Carter ever did, at least.
You know, you did talk about Lyndon Johnson and Jimmy Carter. One of our former guests, Steve Dace, he tweeted this out and sent it to me this morning at 7:00. We start early between not just Jude that pinging me, it's my buddy Steve up in Iowa. He said, take Jimmy Carter, but then place him 40 years later in post-Christian America, so the foundations have largely been destroyed, add a splash of dementia, and that's the Biden presidency. From well-meaning but naive incompetence to sinister incompetence, as you said, as you described it. And I think that's a perfect analogy of what we're dealing with right now.
Well, look, it's real simple. If anyone is still defending this man, they don't literally have any moral core or principle. He's a dirty old man. He's financially corrupt. Hunter is a bum. His brother is a bum. And he's basically a political version of a mafia don.
Yeah, you know,
and he's probably owned. You talk about they try to claim that the Russians own Trump. That was nonsense. Okay, but this is not nonsense. I don't see how anybody who is doing what he's done in Afghanistan can be considered an American. He's serving Russian interests. He's serving Chinese interests. They're the ones benefiting from it. The rare earth minerals are now China's.
Yeah.
Shame on any Democrat who can't look in the mirror and say, we was taken and we are sorry. Because if you can't bring yourself to that, when you see children being thrown over fences, hoping they get on a plane while mom leaves them behind, there is something ungodly about you.
There has been some polling going on in the last week where a large number of Democrats who admit to voting for Biden are now sorry they voted for him.
It was only about 12%.
Okay, but that goes back to my point where 1 out of 10 Democrats admitted that they knew Biden cheated to win the election. If 12 out of 100 Democrats are willing to admit that, number one, they voted for him, and number two, are sorry they did, in this environment, it's way bigger than that. It's probably 2 or 3 times that. I guess I'm being too optimistic, but I'm going to be optimistic. I know who sits on the throne. I know who's not surprised by anything that's happened in this world. And I'm just going to believe that truth and honor and righteousness will win out. I believe it because I know it's true. And we need to pray for our nation. We need to pray for the Bidens. I sent out a tweet last night. I sent it to you. I sent it out right before I went to bed. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. I wrote, I'm praying that while POTUS is in Delaware, his family and friends will have the courage to confront him and convince him it's time to resign. There's no saving grace way to resign. However, it's better than being removed by the 25th Amendment. Hashtag Biden must resign. I don't know if there's enough decency in that Biden family and at all to see the games up, but hopefully there'll be enough Democrats that will start streaming in to Delaware this weekend. And
apparently he's canceled that, supposedly. Something I just saw said he's going to be at the White House and not in Delaware.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, because the optics are horrible on that. Nevertheless, we need a Barry Goldwater from the Democrat Party to walk into the Oval Office like he did with Richard Nixon and say, Mr. President, your time's up. And
you know what I hope for? And you talk about being naive, Dave. I mentioned earlier with our guest that the first geopolitical thing I was really aware of as a child was the Hungarian Revolution. And in terms of American politics, the biggest charge I got as I look back on my life, I'm at that point in life where you do a lot of looking back and analyze the various changes. The Nixon-Kennedy debate was real politics two war veterans talking to each other, both adults in the room. And one of the problems we have right now in both political parties, but way more in the Democrats, we don't have a lot of adults in the room. What I find very interesting right now, no one's writing about it much, but in the Republican Party, I think we find more, shall we say, muscle among many of our women who are in the House of Representatives than men. We seem to have a lot of very fit, very strong women to admire who are Republicans, and we seem to have an awful lot of rhinos and limp-wristed nudniks for our many of our men. We need more Tom Cottons, if you know what I'm talking about.
You know why that is because most of those limp wristers are lawyers, and I'm not trying to disparage all lawyers or the profession of law. On the opposite of that, you know why most of those women are like that? They're mamas. You know that. We both have daughters who are mamas.
Oh yeah, my daughter's a very good defender of the Dagger Cubs, and she knows how to love them and she knows how to guide them.
Sarah Palin put it best. She called herself a mama grizzly. You come up on my Cubs, you just bought the whole package, and that's true. Well, I think we'll end it on that note, bro. And man, this was a great honor to have Professor Furedi back on. And I think what we'll do is once all the dust settles on this, if it does, and we start reading more things about across the pond about what's going on, I'm already seeing that a lot of the European leaders do not want to take Biden's calls, especially about OPEC just rejected him. No, we won't pump more oil. Sorry.
Why would any president of the United States turn off the Keystone Project, take oil from the federal lands where we're taking it, say no, screw up again on ANWR? You're supposed to protect your country. I mean, a really simple thing. Has he done anything to benefit America or America's enemies? What's the score?
Yeah. Even all the extra free money he gave us caused inflation. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Again, it was a great honor. And if we're lucky, we'll bring them back. We do have some guests set up. We will have at the first week sometime in September, I have to look at my schedule. We have a return appearance by Dr. Ted Baer from Movie Guide. And
September 7th.
Yes, that's right. September 7th. And then also on Monday,
the 13th.
The 13th, we're going to have Bill Federer on for the third time, and he's going to talk to us in advance of Constitution Day coming up on the Sunday, the 19th. He had to come on early because he, of course, with what's happening, he has a whole bunch of speaking engagements, and he's going to be out of town every weekend coming up to that event. But he promised us he'll come on our show, and we got him booked, so that's going to be another exciting show. And I'm still working on Brian Ward to come back because he has probably 2 or 3 episodes worth of information about the voter
polling.
The voter, not just the polling, but what's been going on with all the voter discrepancies, we'll call it. So be sure you share this podcast with everybody. Please do subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel. We're on Stitcher. Oh, by the way, we're on iHeartRadio now, full living color. We're proud to be there. We had to wait 90 days because they don't want posers and startups. They want real people. We're now on like episode 28. We've already cranked out 27, 28 shows. I know it's pretty hard to believe, but we sure have. And, but we love doing it. And, so please do share go to the miningthemedia.com. That's where you want to go. You can share the website with people there. They can easily subscribe to anything they want to listen to or watch for our show.
And we've got a couple of links there, like the Big Project UK and cinternet.org, which are great sites for multiple versions of the news and views.
Yes, that's a new thing we did do. And I'm still going to work on I'm still visualizing a page where we can it'll be a blog post page, but what I'll do is kind of like put maybe links to or recap shows and maybe things we talk about and specific articles we want to share. I'll try to get that up here in a few days and start throwing some content on there, because as Professor Furedi said and what GK said during the interview, we got to expand our minds. We got to expand our horizons. We need to just stop going to our comfortable sites and
Information versus affirmation.
exactly. And no infotainment. This ain't about infotainment. All right. So until next time, folks, take care, and we'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.